Blink once, and it's week 10 already of the high school football. Welcome back to the Temple Day Telegram Sports Podcast. This is Josh, along with Daniel, Greg, and Marcus. How's everyone doing?
Great. Awesome.
Oh, woo-hoo. Daniel's going to make it. He's actually really excited. He just, the Astros winning the World Series a couple nights ago. I mean, that just put him over the top. Good stuff all around. We got a lot to talk about in this episode, as usual. And because I have one of the two microphones in hand, I'm going to start it off. Belton defeated Killeen Ellison last night, 31-21, to clinch a fourth straight playoff berth and the number one seed into playoffs. It was a good win for the Tigers. They had 435 yards rushing for the game, 279 of those in the first half. Quarterback Connor Carruthers had 111 of those. Running back Darren Rector had 187. And Belton closed out the game with a 7-minute drive that went from its 2-yard line to Ellison's 9, and that sewed it up. Belton going back to the playoffs, and they will likely get a home playoff game for the second year in a row. That hasn't been decided yet, but that looks like it's going to be on the horizon in the coming days, or I guess we'll probably have to wait till next week to see how everything. But that's pretty exciting for first-year head coach Sam Skidmore and Belton. So that's that for the Tigers. I'm going to get right to Greg and the Temple College Station matchup that he's going to be at tonight. It's basically for the district championship.
Yeah, it's not that in name, but basically that is what's on the line. You got Temple at 6-2 overall, 4-0 in district, 18-5A. You got College Station 7-2, 5-0. The difference being that College Station, this will be their 10th straight week to play, and then they'll take a bye next week before the playoffs. Temple will have one more game next week. They'll host Bryan to end the regular season. So basically what's on the line tonight, if College Station wins, they're obviously, undisputed district champions at 6-0. If Temple wins the game, they'll be 5-0, and they'll secure at least a share of the district title. And if they beat Bryan, which is expected next week, they'll be the outright champs for the, I believe, third time in 4 years and 4 district titles in 5 years overall if Temple can get that done. So, it's a big game, and really it's just like a carbon copy of last year. You had same stakes. Of course, last year College Station was undefeated and I believe ranked 7th in the state at the time. So they'd had a little more of a dominant season, but if you look at what they've done in district this year, really you'd say they're probably just as strong. They just, played some really tough teams early in the season, just like Temple did. That's why you have each team with a couple of losses. But it's worth noting, neither one of these teams has lost to a 5A opponent all season. So, if you're just looking at how they stack up with the rest of 5A, you could make a case that they should both be state ranked, even though they're not at the moment. Last year was an interesting game, 17-16. College Station won at Wildcat Stadium. And interesting thing about the game, there was only one offensive touchdown. Very, very good defense by both sides. Each team returned a punt for a touchdown. Temple returned an interception for a touchdown. They were down 10-0, came back to take a 16-10 lead. Missed an extra point, though, and that opened the door for College Station. They scored on I don't know if you would call it a trick play, but it was a handoff to a guy rolling right, and then he threw the ball. And it didn't necessarily fool Temple, but it still went for a 27-yard touchdown. And I believe the kid who caught it, Campbell, he's still back this year. But anyway, then they made the extra point. And what was interesting how the game ended was Temple had pinned College Station down inside its own 10-yard line with 7 minutes left. So you're thinking, okay, well, Temple will probably get a stop and have a chance to get the ball back with good field position, only down 1. College Station, I forget how many exactly first downs they made, but they marched 88 yards, and they took all 7 minutes off of the clock and just got continually picked up first downs on 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 5. And Marquez Perez, their really athletic quarterback, he was Temple shut him down all the way up until that point. He led them on a great drive, mostly with his running, a little bit of passing, and he basically just tired out Temple's defense, ended the game. They didn't score on the drive, but the clock went to zeros, and that's how the game ended. So I know Temple's very frustrated, thinking they made too many mistakes that night, but looking back, that's a College Station team that went 14-1, made the state semifinals in Division II, so they were a worthy opponent. And I think Temple's definitely got some revenge on their mind. They might not admit that per se, but this is a chance to kind of right the wrong for the kids who were, have played in both games, and I think it's a coin flip matchup tonight.
You mentioned College Station. This is going to be their 10th game in a row. Temple was on its bye last week, so they've been waiting 2 weeks basically for this big game. Does that have any effect either way going into it, do you think?
I think, probably just getting a little better understanding for what College Station likes to do. I think Temple already had a pretty good handle on it, but, you have a little extra time to prepare for anybody. I think that's to your advantage. And probably the biggest thing for Temple is getting Monto President back in the lineup. He's, most of the year was at linebacker. He's had to move to safety because of some injuries. He's their leading tackler. He's basically missed 2 full games. Got hurt against Brian Rudder in the first quarter. Missed the rest of that game. He had to sit out the Waco game because of a concussion protocol. But with the rest and the bye week, he's back full strength, and he may be the key defensive figure against Marquez Perez because Temple coach Scott Stewart says this guy Perez is probably the fastest, most athletic player, period, much less quarterback that they've seen this year, and they put it in his hands a lot. He's a good runner. He's a good thrower. He's committed to Tulsa as a wide receiver, so obviously he's quick and has some moves. And College Station has a really good defense too. A lot of guys back from last year. So I think the one matchup to really look for in this game is Xavier Johnson, Deontay Hextall, the Temple receivers. They can do some damage down the field. Catching passes from TJ Rumfield, that's going to be a big for Temple because I don't think you're going to be able to just have a lot of long drives against these guys. You're going to have to take some chances, hit some big plays, and then just contain what College Station likes to do on offense. And I'm not sure it'll be quite as low scoring as last year, but I think it'll be just as competitive.
Well, Temple, College Station already in the playoffs, but obviously that one's going to be huge. You can read all about it in Saturday's sports section. A lot of things are taking shape as far as the playoffs go around the area. As I mentioned, Belton clinched Thursday night, but there's a lot of teams on the bubble. There are some teams that can clinch tonight. I know Marcus has been kind of looking up and down the standings, Googling and doing all sorts of other things, trying to look at some of these scenarios. What have you found so far?
As expected, going into the last couple of weeks season, there's a lot that can really play out. I'm not going to go down everybody in our area,
That's fine.
Some of the highlights. You look at. I know Greg talked about the importance of the Temple game. Of course, Belton clinched tonight, or last night, I should say. The Temple game obviously has a lot of meaning, and the rest of that district can still play out a lot of ways, as can the 6A district. There's a lot of scenarios there still work their way out. Ellison's probably still got a pretty decent chance of getting in.
It's like 3 teams looking at those 2 final spots: Harker Heights, Ellison, and Coppers Cove.
Right.
Killeen maybe an outside shot, but
I haven't looked too deeply in that, but Killeen may. They could win out and kind of at least cause some confusion.
Right,
there.
for sure.
But moving elsewhere, out in the big district around here that everybody really likes to look at is our 3A district with Rockdale, Cameron, and all that. Rockdale and Franklin tonight, they're playing basically for the top seed in that district. Both of them are in the playoffs at 4-0 in the district. So that's basically the winner of that game will have the district's top seed. And the loser more than likely has the second seed. But the rest of it, there's still some teams, McGregor, Troy, Cameron, Yale, and Academy all can still get in. Academy's got to get a lot of help to make it in. They're probably the most on the bubble, but how it plays out tonight, the big game to watch really is the Cameron versus Troy game. If Troy beats Cameron, Cameron's eliminated from playoff contention. But that doesn't mean that Troy necessarily clinches a spot, but what has to happen, Troy would get in if they win and McGregor goes ahead and beats Academy. If that doesn't happen, if that does happen, then the 4 teams are set with Rockdale, Franklin, McGregor, and Troy. If that doesn't happen, then they can still a possibility that Troy gets in or McGregor gets in, depending on next week's game. If Troy wins tonight, then next week's game between Troy and McGregor basically will determine the final spot. If Troy loses tonight, then they can still get in by beating.
They have to win next week.
And it basically, they have to win, and they can still. There's still like a point scenario. It really depends on their score this week and next week. But it's kind of confusing to kind of explain right now unless we know the score of tonight's games. But it'll play out. Basically, it's a matter of Yo really needs to win.
Well, it's just and that's kind of the crazy thing this year too, is that we're talking about Cameron Yo needing to win their season finale, because they have a bye like College Station does in the final week of the season. But for the Yeomen to be this close to being in or this close to being out is
Exactly.
pretty amazing. And on the other hand, I mean, how exciting is it in Rockdale for another year, second straight year? I mean, a win tonight would give them at least a share of the district title, and if they
Correct.
win next week, then it's the full district title, which I know is something they've been wanting.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of excitement in Rockdale right now. Not just a district title's in hand. I mean, it's going to be tough to beat Franklin, but I think they have the talent to do it. I don't know how. I didn't even look to see how we picked this game, but yeah, okay, it was across the board Rockdale, and I think that's probably indicative of how good we think Rockdale is. I mean, they've got some talented kids, so yeah, there's a lot of excitement in Rockdale right now, and if they catch fire, I mean, if those kids are healthy, they have the team that could potentially be a state title contender. I mean, they still have a few things they need to work on.
First things first, yeah.
Yeah, and they'll get a good test. I mean, we'll see. We'll get to know, have a better idea depending on how they come out against Franklin tonight. Elsewhere, just to kind of give a brief summary, Salado in District 9 4A, they can clinch a playoff spot tonight with a win. There's a scenario that they don't clinch necessarily with a win if both Lorena beats Waco Conley and Mejia beats Fairfield. An unlikely scenario, but
Those would be upsets if that happens.
right, it could still set up a possibility of a three-way tie that could eliminate Salado down the road, but that's a very unlikely scenario. They just kind of need to take care of business tonight against Robinson, which they should do. They should get in the playoffs. Gatesville, if they win tonight against Waco La Vega, also a tough task, but that would clinch a playoff spot for them.
Yeah, two tough matchups in a
Oh,
row
yeah.
for Gatesville.
Yeah, and,
Which had to go through all that off the field stuff too. I mean, that's a rough stretch for them, but playoffs are still likely.
Oh yeah, and I think I think we're all kind of curious to know how much of that was a distraction for them last week in that game, and if they're totally refocused. Because going into that game, just hours beforehand, they didn't really know who all was going to be available, and
Right.
that's going to affect you mentally. It's going to affect your preparation. So I think we'll have a better grasp of what they have tonight against La Vega.
Yeah.
I mean, win, I don't know, but it should be an interesting game for them.
Sure.
Elsewhere, Bruce Folletti's not playing tonight, but if Marlin beats New Waverly, Bruce Folletti's in the playoffs. And
That would snap how long of a streak?
I think
Forever,
it's
right?
like 30.
A long time.
Yeah, it's like 30-something years.
Yeah.
34, I want to say. I'm not even sure that's right. But
Yeah.
then just Rosebud Lot. That's another game that we're going to be watching tonight. That one has some playoff implications. Rosebud Lot could get in the playoffs. A win and basically a win by Raw. Well, actually, I don't want to say that, but a win basically puts Rosebud Lot in a great position to get a playoff spot.
Yeah, because they're playing Thorndale, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on, but those two
Right.
teams are tied for fourth right now, so
Right.
the winner definitely takes the driver's seat toward one of those last playoff spots
Exactly.
in that district. And Holland's right there, too. I think they're tied for second with Moody, so
Yeah, and if Holland beats
Holland-
Normandy, they're in as
Yeah.
well. And Moody can clinch a playoff spot as well with the win. But again, it's basically there's, when you look at it, there's 8 different ways a district can play out with 6 teams on any given night.
Sure.
And with Moody winning, that takes care of 4 of those different scenarios, and 3 of those clinch them a playoff spot. Basically,
Yeah.
too difficult to kind of go. We don't have
Yeah,
that much
and we
time
and we
to
have
kinda
and we
go
have
through all
another
the
week,
scenarios, but- right.
of games. I'm sure we'll talk more about it
And-
going into week 11. But
And also Granger, they can clinch a playoff spot tonight. They're playing a tough team against Burton, so we'll see what happens there. But a win would get them in the playoffs, basically. And then going all the way down to our 6-man team, Buckholtz, they have another tough one against Calvert, but that gets them in the playoffs if they win that. Small little district there. But,
Yeah.
And that's just kind of a brief overview. We'll know a lot more after tonight's
Yeah.
done with.
yeah,
So.
the picture will be much clearer after tonight's slate of games. And like I said, we'll explore a bunch of it again next week, and we'll probably know some actual playoff matchups
I
by
was gonna
next
say,
week as well.
Yeah, by next week, it might not be a matter of scenarios, more of just like who their first opponent may be and where. And
Right.
a lot of teams already have that set up. Like
Right.
if Rockdale wins, they probably already know who they're going to play.
Sure.
And Miller's good about that. Coach Jeff Miller on Rockdale, he's good about already looking at things and having stadiums set, because now with so many teams in the playoffs, you almost have to get a stadium secured
Yeah.
weeks in advance. So,
Right.
So yeah, we'll see. We'll definitely know a lot more next week.
Well, as we mentioned, Rosebud Lot and Thorndale is the game we're keeping an eye on, and that's because Daniel's going to be there.
I am going to be there. You know what? If you are a fan of Texas high school football and you're listening to our podcast, so I assume that you are, but this is a great time to to be excited right now. There's a lot of stuff going on with playoffs just around the corner, and as Marcus just talked about, hundreds of different scenarios that could play out, so we've got you covered over the next week, so definitely be sure to stick with us. We'll guide you on through the playoffs. But yeah, I will be at the Thorndale Rosebud Lot game. This one is going to be really, really interesting. Both teams holding on to that fourth spot in District 13 2A1. Pretty similar. Both are 1-2 in district. Thorndale is 2-6. Rosebud Lot 5-3. So, the Bulldogs had a little rougher non-district schedule. Rosebud Lot not as tough, but both teams are just they're gonna run the heck out of the ball. They're just gonna run. Should be a quick game. A lot of time burn off the clock. Thorndale's
that would be great, by the way.
That would be great
because I'm gonna be in the office waiting for that story to come in. So as early as that game ends, the better.
I'll even see if Coach Ballard over for the Cougars wants to speed things up. Yeah. Maybe no timeouts in the second half. So we'll see what happens. Sure. But for the Thorndale Bulldogs, they're led by running back Luke Leschber. He's got 867 yards on the season, 5 touchdowns. And then over on the other side, if you've listened to our podcast at all, you'll probably recognize the name Jacorian Johnson. He's got over 1,500 yards rushing on the season as the quarterback. And this guy does it all for the Cougars. He's got 21 touchdowns on the season. I was just talking to Greg here before I got the mic. He's got a pretty good shot with 2 games left to really break that 2,000 rushing yards mark on the season. So we'll keep an eye on that. This guy can put up 350 yards on the ground any given night, and it's definitely possible. This game is really going to come down to what defense is going to decide to show up. Both very similar. Thorndale has allowed 85 points in district. Rosebud Lot a hair better at 84, so you don't get much closer than that, except if you're tied. In district so far, the Bulldogs, they won their district opener against Normandy, and then they've dropped their last 2 at Moody, 21-6, and then another loss versus Holland. Holland having a strong season, 38-27. And then Rosebud Lot, same story. They won their opener versus Moody, 33-13, and then back-to-back losses at Holland, 36-14, and then Thrall, 35-21. So really, when it comes down to it, if Thorndale probably needs this win more than Rosebud Lot. It's an important win for both sides, but the Bulldogs definitely want to win tonight, because if they don't win tonight, then it comes down to them trying to make the playoffs, needing a win in their finale against Thrall, which, as Marcus said, 7-1 on the season, 3-0, and it doesn't look like they're going to lose any of those district matchups. So that would definitely put Thorndale behind the 8 ball if they lose tonight against Rosebud Lot. Rosebud Lot with a little more wiggle room. They definitely want to get the win tonight, make sure that everything gets tied up and everything goes according to plan. But if they don't get it done tonight, there's always the week after. They'll travel to Normandy, and they've been having a rough season, 2-6, 0-3 at the bottom of the district. So again, both teams definitely want to get the win tonight. Just keep their playoff hopes alive and well, keep them in the driver's seat. But again, if it comes down to it, Thorndale really, really needs the win tonight, because if they don't get it, then they're faced with probably the toughest task of their season so far, hosting Thrall that next week. So again, both of these teams are just going to run the ball, and it's going to, along with the defense, it's going to come down to who can finish off drives. Both of these offenses can put a lot of points on the board, but both sides got to finish drives, and if you finish drives strong, if you settle for field goals rather than touchdowns, it could be the difference maker.
Sounds good. That'll be another good one for you to see. I heard you say the phrase "go according to plan." We don't have a plan beyond this point right here.
We don't.
So I thought, maybe we can mention UMHB's on the road Saturday in Louisiana, which will probably be another smackdown by the Crusaders. I'm just guessing, just based on recent results.
Eric, is it squirrel season in Louisiana this time of year? Has that opened yet? Is there a bag limit on those?
It's as many as Ken DeWeese can eat.
If you're from Texas, do you have to apply for a license when you cross state borders before you catch them?
No, you can shoot anything that moves.
Okay, thanks. Good to know.
That was the perfect way to end this podcast, I believe, unless anyone else has anything else to add to that. Daniel reaching for the microphone.
I do. I don't have anything really to add. I just want to say it is hard to top, squirrel hunting advice. So I think that is a excellent note for us to end on. Greg usually has good little tidbits. Does he have anything to end on? He's got the Michael Vick football in his hand. He's ready to go.
We appreciate everyone listening once again this week. We will be back next week with another episode of this awesome podcast. Happy hunting.